She pointed her finger at me in front of everyone at my own father's funeral and said, "You don't belong here." I stood in the rain outside the church while they buried my daddy without me. But that same afternoon, before the dirt even settled on his grave, a lawyer showed up. And what he said out loud in front of everybody changed everything. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, if you've ever had to fight just to be seen as who you really are, stay with me until the end because this story is not just mine. It could be yours too. Subscribe right now because you do not want to miss how this ends. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I was my father's only daughter, his first child, the one who used to sit on his lap while he read the newspaper on Sunday mornings. My father was not a rich man when I was young. He worked with his hands, fixed cars, drove trucks, did whatever it took to put food on our table after my mother passed when I was just 7 years old. It was just me and him for years. He used to braid my hair before school because there was no one else to do it. He burned the eggs almost every single morning, but I ate them anyway because he made them with love, even if he could not cook. By the time I was in my 20s, my father's small repair business had grown into something real. He owned 3 properties, a small trucking company, and a good amount of savings. He worked hard for every single dollar, and he never forgot where he came from. He used to tell me, "Baby girl, everything I built so you would never have to struggle the way I did." Those words used to comfort me. Later, they would break my heart in ways I never expected. When I was 26, my father met a woman. I will call her by what she became to me, my stepmother, because that is the only title she ever earned in my eyes. At first, she seemed kind. She smiled a lot, she complimented my father's success, she told me how happy she was to finally have a daughter in her life since she never had children of her own. I wanted to believe her. I wanted my father to be happy. He had been alone for so long, and I thought maybe this was his second chance at love. But slowly, so slowly that I almost did not notice it happening, things began to shift. She started making comments about how the house needed updating, how the business could use better management, how certain family photos should come down to make room for new ones. She started sitting in on my father's private business meetings. She started answering his phone calls before he could reach it. She started introducing herself as the one who really runs things now. My father, being the kind man he was, brushed it off. He told me I was overthinking things. He told me she was just trying to help, trying to be involved, trying to feel like part of the family. I wanted to trust his judgment because he had never steered me wrong before. But something in my stomach kept telling me this woman was not who she pretended to be. 2 years into their marriage, my father had his first heart attack. It scared all of us. I rushed to the hospital, canceled my work trip, sat by his bedside for 4 days straight. My stepmother was there too, but something about her presence felt different. She was on her phone constantly, stepping out to take calls, speaking in hushed tones to people I did not recognize. When my father woke up and asked for me, she was the one who told the nurses I should wait outside for a moment while she had a private conversation with him first. I let it go because I was just grateful he was alive. After that first heart attack, my father started slowing down. He handed more responsibility over to my stepmother, trusting her to help manage his affairs while he focused on healing. I noticed she started using the word "we" a lot. We decided to sell that property. We are thinking of restructuring the business. We feel it's time to update the will. Every single time she said "we," I felt a small piece of my father slipping further away from me. I tried talking to him about it privately once. I sat him down and asked him directly if everything was okay, if he trusted her completely with everything he had built. He looked at me with tired eyes and said something I will never forget. He said, "Baby girl, I know how to protect what matters most. Don't you worry about a thing." At the time, I thought he meant he had blind trust in her. Looking back now, I understand he meant something completely different. He had already started protecting me in ways I could not see. Over the next year, my father's health declined faster than any of us expected. A second heart attack, followed by kidney complications, followed by weeks in and out of hospitals. During this time, my stepmother became more distant from me and more controlling of everything around my father. She limited my visits, claiming he needed rest. She would schedule doctor's appointments without telling me until after they happened. She made decisions about his care that I only found out about secondhand from nurses who felt sorry for me. I want you to understand something. I was not fighting for money. I was not fighting for property. I was fighting for time with my father, the only parent I had left in this world, the man who braided my hair and burned eggs and told me I would never have to struggle the way he did. Every day she kept me away from him felt like she was stealing pieces of him that I would never get back. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, I received the phone call every child dreads. My father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I remember dropping to my knees in my kitchen, the phone slipping from my hand, my whole body shaking with a grief so deep I could not breathe properly for several minutes. Despite everything that had happened, despite every wall she had built between us, my father was gone and none of the tension mattered anymore. All I felt was loss. The funeral was scheduled quickly within the same week. I threw myself into helping plan it, choosing flowers he would have loved, writing a eulogy that captured who he truly was, reaching out to old family friends who needed to know. My stepmother allowed me to participate in the planning, which gave me false hope that maybe, in our shared grief, we could find some kind of peace between us. The morning of the funeral, I dressed in black, the same color as the hole growing inside my chest. I arrived early at the church, wanting to have a few private moments near his casket before the crowd arrived. The moment I walked through those doors, I felt it, a coldness in the air, eyes that would not meet mine, whispers that stopped the second I got close. Something was wrong. I approached the front of the church where my father lay in his casket, dressed in the navy suit I had helped pick out. Before I could even process the sight of him, my stepmother appeared beside me, gripping my arm tightly enough to leave a mark. She pulled me to the side, away from the small crowd that had already gathered, and told me in a low, sharp voice that I needed to leave. I asked her what she was talking about. This was my father's funeral. I had every right to be there. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, something cold and calculated, and told me that certain family members were uncomfortable with my presence, that there had been concerns raised about my relationship with my father in his final months, that it would be best for everyone if I stepped outside during the service. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I looked around at the faces gathering in the pews, some familiar, some strangers, none of them stepping forward to defend me. My own aunt, my father's sister, looked away when I caught her eye. I realized in that moment that my stepmother had been telling people things about me, poisoning the well long before I even walked through those doors. I tried to stand my ground. I told her I was not leaving my father's funeral. That is when she raised her voice loud enough for the front rows to hear, pointing her finger directly at my chest, telling me, "You don't belong here." The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. Two ushers, men I did not recognize, approached and gently but firmly guided me toward the exit. I did not fight them. I could not find the strength to fight anyone in that moment. My entire body had gone numb with shock and humiliation. I walked out of that church into a light rain that had started falling, the kind of rain that feels like the sky itself is grieving alongside you. I stood on the church steps, unable to leave completely, unable to walk away from my own father's funeral. I watched through the glass doors as people filed in. As the service began, as the woman my father had trusted with his final years stood at the podium delivering a eulogy about a man I was not sure she truly knew. I do not know how long I stood there. Time felt frozen. My mind kept replaying memories, my father's laugh, the smell of his cologne, the way he used to call me every Sunday just to check on me even after I moved out on my own. I thought about all the things I never got to say to him, all the moments I would now carry as regret instead of closure. Then, just as the service seemed to be reaching its end, a black car pulled up outside the church. A man in a gray suit stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase, walking with the kind of purpose that made people notice him immediately. He walked directly past me and into the church, and something about the look on his face told me this was not a random mourner arriving late. Within minutes, I heard raised voices from inside. The doors opened again, and this time it was my stepmother's face that had changed, pale, tight, unsure of herself for the first time since I had known her. The man in the gray suit stepped outside and looked directly at me. He introduced himself as my father's lawyer, the one who had handled his estate planning for the last several years, someone I had never personally met because my father always handled those matters privately. He told me something that made my knees weak all over again, but this time from a different kind of shock. He said my father had left very specific, very legal instructions. The will could not be read, not one single word of it, unless I was present. My father had built this condition into the legal documents himself, anticipating exactly what might happen on this day. He had protected me from beyond the grave. The lawyer asked me to come inside. I hesitated, my body still remembering the humiliation of being pulled out just moments before. But he assured me that legally there was nothing anyone could do to stop me from entering. My father had made sure of that. I walked back through those church doors, past the same faces that had watched me get escorted out, and this time I held my head high. The room fell silent as I walked in. My stepmother stood near the front, her face a mixture of fury and disbelief. Family members who had avoided my eyes earlier now stared openly, confused about what was happening. The lawyer asked everyone to remain for a brief reading, explaining that my father had left instructions for this to happen immediately following the service, in this very room with all key family members present. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope along with a formal document. He explained that my father had updated his will 18 months earlier, shortly after that first heart attack, during a period when my stepmother believed she was gaining more control. But in reality, my father had been quietly working with this lawyer to protect what mattered most to him. The lawyer began reading. Small gifts were left to distant relatives, a modest sum to a charity my father had supported for years, personal items distributed among close friends. Then came the section regarding the main estate, the properties, the business, the savings my father had spent his whole life building. My stepmother stood a little straighter, clearly expecting to hear her name attached to the majority of it. Instead, the lawyer read that the primary residence, the trucking business, and the bulk of my father's savings and investments were to be placed in a trust, with me named as the primary beneficiary. My stepmother would receive a fixed, modest allowance for a period of 5 years, but full ownership and control belonged to me. The room went completely silent except for a few gasps. My stepmother's face transformed from shock into anger. She began shouting that this was impossible, that the will must have been forged, that my father would never have done this to her after everything she had sacrificed for him. The lawyer calmly continued reading, explaining that my father had left a personal letter to accompany the legal documents, one he had specifically requested be read aloud if this exact situation occurred. The lawyer unfolded a handwritten letter and began reading my father's own words. He wrote that he had noticed the changes happening around him in his final years, that he had seen how his wife's behavior toward his daughter had shifted, that he had overheard conversations he was never meant to hear, and that he had quietly begun documenting everything, working with his lawyer to make sure his true wishes could never be twisted or ignored. He wrote that he loved his wife, that he did not write this letter out of hatred, but out of a father's deepest instinct to protect his child even after death. He wrote that he suspected, based on certain financial discrepancies he discovered and conversations he was not supposed to overhear, that his wife had been planning to push his daughter out of his life, entirely believing that with him gone there would be nothing standing between her and everything he had built. He wrote directly to me in that letter. He said, "Baby girl, if you are hearing this, it means she tried something, and I am sorry I could not protect you while I was alive the way I wanted to. But I made sure that even in death I would have your back. Everything I built was always for you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in a room your own blood built." Tears streamed down my face as the lawyer finished reading those words. The room was completely silent except for my own quiet sobbing. This was not the vindication I had imagined moments earlier when I first walked back into that church. This was something deeper, a final gift from my father, proof that even in his weakest moments, he had been thinking of me, protecting me, loving me in ways I had not fully understood while he was still breathing. My stepmother did not stay quiet for long. She accused the lawyer of manipulation, threatened legal action, claimed she would contest the will immediately. The lawyer calmly informed her and everyone else in the room that my father had taken additional steps specifically to prevent this. He had recorded a video statement, made in the presence of two independent witnesses and a medical professional, confirming his full mental competency, explaining his reasoning in his own voice. He had anticipated exactly this reaction. In the weeks that followed, my stepmother did attempt to contest the will. The video statement, along with financial records showing unusual transfers she had attempted to make in the months prior, worked against her. The court upheld my father's final wishes completely. During the legal process, it also came out that she had been quietly moving money into separate accounts for over a year, exactly the kind of behavior my father had suspected and documented before his passing. I will not pretend the money and property brought me comfort in those early weeks. What brought me comfort was reading and rereading that letter, hearing my father's voice through his own written words, understanding that even when I felt most alone standing in that rain outside the church, I was never truly abandoned. My father had been fighting for me the entire time, quietly, carefully, in the only way his failing health allowed him to. Months later, I stood at my father's grave alone, the way I had wanted to on the day of his funeral before everything happened. I brought fresh flowers, the same kind he used to grow in our small backyard garden when I was a child. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and I talked to him the way I used to talk to him every Sunday on the phone. I told him about the business, how I had kept it running, how I had honored his legacy the way he always hoped I would. I forgave my stepmother eventually, not because she deserved it, not because what she did was acceptable, but because holding onto that anger was only hurting me, not her. My father taught me that real strength is not about revenge. It is about protecting what matters and moving forward with grace even when others try to strip that grace away from you. That is the lesson I carry with me every single day now. If you have ever felt pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love you, if you have ever had to fight for a place that should have been yours without question, I want you to know that your worth does not depend on other people's approval. Sometimes the people who love us most protect us in ways we cannot see until it matters most. My father protected me from beyond the grave because he knew, deep down, exactly who I was and exactly what I deserved. If this story touched something in you, if you have ever had to stand your ground within your own family, tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share this with someone who might need to hear it today. Because sometimes the truth takes its time to come out, but it always finds its way into the light.